Yes, I'll explain about that. Welcome everybody to our weekly WISE lecture series tonight. We are so happy to have all of you here, and we want to have a shout out to those that are watching online. Let me just start off by telling you a little bit about what Weekly WISE is and what it's all about, and then we'll introduce our speaker. So for those of you who know my husband Matt, he has this obsession with ice cream, and particularly Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And so Weekly WISE actually started as a way to get rid of some extra ice cream that we have around our house. It's kind of a silly little thing, but we hosted a free cone day experience a few months ago and gave away tons of Ben & Jerry's, but we bought tons more than we needed for the people who came. So it really was, we're standing around the kitchen trying to think, what do we do with all this ice cream? So that's how Weekly WISE was born. We also knew that we wanted to figure out some way to invite people into our home to share a little bit about our business, which we will be doing after the lecture. So I hope you saw in the email that that's part of the event tonight, is the lecture and then a little business presentation. Although personally, I'm more excited about the lecture because I am so excited tonight for this lecture. So every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, we do it. If you would like to participate, you're always welcome here, and this is where the free ice cream is. Although if you can't make it, but you can watch online, you can either watch live stream online or you can watch after the fact. And so the way to find that is to like our Weekly WISE lecture series page on Facebook. And each week we create an event for that particular lecture. So find us that way. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'd love to have you join us for future Weekly WISE as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Skyler. From what I know of him, I'm just going to share my experience of him because I don't know a lot of his backstory and his life. But I personally met Skyler a couple years ago at the Meet the Candidates night when he was running for city council. And I was walking around meeting the candidates, looking at the tables, and I was like, whoa, who is this guy with all these books? And some of them I've read, and a lot of them I want to read. And this person who obviously knows his stuff that's running for city council, and it was like a breath of fresh air that there was someone running from city council who obviously studied and wanted to understand the principles behind the way government should work. And from that moment on, I was just excited to get to know more about him. And every time I've heard him speak, he came and participated in a Principles of Liberty course that we were hosting in our home a few years back. And then at other things, when I've heard him speak, I've just always learned and always enjoyed myself. And so that is why when we created Weekly WISE, I said, let's invite Skyler. So that's my introduction. That's what I know of him, and I hope he'll tell us a little more about himself and a whole lot more of great principles that we want to learn. So please help me welcome Skyler Hamilton.
Thank you. Probably not much about me, but I appreciate that. That was so kind. And thank you so much for hosting and inviting me to speak. Also, it's a half hour, right? 30 minutes? Yep. So thank you, Colin, for letting me know, and the time's running out. So the title, I believe I emphasized principles and forms and the distinction between the two. I woke up this morning and realized just discussing principles can be a little hollow if I don't ever cover the value of principles and why they're important and their quote-unquote nature. But first, I want to delve a little bit into language. Words matter. That's my first point. Words matter. Thoughts matter. Really quickly, I'm going to be mentioning Isaac Newton tonight, one of the most important people in all of human history. And for a while, he was president of what's called the Royal Society in England. And the saying for the Royal Society is nullius in verba. This is their saying, and this is my first point before I get started. on the word of no one. And the way we would use it, take no one's word for it. At the end of the day, please do your own thinking, do your own researching. Think for yourselves. And if you have any questions on evidence or thoughts, please come and ask me. No institution can long be preserved but by frequent recurrence to those maxims, those principles in which it was formed. It's George Mason, who was very prominent, probably third or fourth most vocal person at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. And it's a wise warning for any institution that if you stray from the integrity on which you are founded, you leave the basis for the institution's existence. Okay, words matter. I want to make a distinction between words and concepts. Often a battle over words are a battle over the meaning of those words. And depending on how you define those words, you can have an opposite result. Let me give a few examples. Res publica. This is a Latin term meaning the public thing. We translate that as republic. What it really means, though, is just government. But during the founding era, founding America, it took on a whole meaning as if there were principles which determined whether or not a government was a republic. Truth be told, in Latin, it just means government. It's a very different meaning, and over time, these words change. And if you're not sensitive to context, you can misunderstand what's being said. An example, if you're studying Egypt, if you read any Egyptian texts in the ancient world, they use the word heart. But as in modern thought, we associate the heart with emotion. The Egyptians saw it as the seat of your intelligence, of your knowledge, of your mind. So if you read a text and misapply our understanding of the word into that text, you will miss the entire point that's being communicated. The word faith. If often it's used as, well, now it's even used sometimes as a religious denomination. But often it's meant to, as a word of believing in something you don't understand. Joseph Smith defined it as a principle of action in intelligent beings. So you can see how that word, depending on how it's defined, can mean totally different things in the extreme. And if you bring an understanding and read that into something, you don't approach a text on its own terms, as opposed to what you want it to say, what you think it means, you're going to miss the point. Aristotle has an essay called On Interpretation, and he says this: words spoken are symbols or signs of affections or impressions of the soul. Written words are the signs of the words spoken. As writing, so also is speech, not the same for all races of men. But the mental affections themselves, of which these words are the signs, are the same for the whole of mankind. So Aristotle sees this distinction. You have the words that can express concepts, the concepts apply to things. And often the battle of language is so prominent in the war of ideas. Often it's really a battle over the meaning of those words. It's interesting, there's this is so prominent in analysis of texts, whether it's the Constitution, any text in the Bible, Homer's Odyssey, doesn't matter. Back around the 60s, you had a movement, postmodernism, and we shifted to what's called reader response. I don't even want to give it the title theory, doesn't deserve it, versus authorial intent. Two different schools of thought. Pre-postmodernism, this was typically what you learned in higher education. I mean, this one, authorial intent. Read a response, you just read the words, and you put your meaning into the words. Authorial intent, you get to the mind of the author in any context they are from. You got to realize that any translation is an interpretation. And so are we interpreting to understand or to justify our own opinions? Do we put what we want these documents to say, put our meaning into them? Or do we seek to understand what the author intended? And the author's going to have not only intent in terms of what he or she is trying to communicate, but they have a historical context as well. So the best translators are those who are able to get to the mindset of the author. Whether that's the New Testament era or anything else. In this case, it's the Constitution. We have to approach their terms. You have to approach the text on its own terms. So essentially, I'm going to simplify this down to philosophy versus philodoxy. What does philosophy mean? Philo, Greek word for love or friend. Sophia is wisdom, or philodoxy, lovers of opinion. So, when you, this is what's interesting is, so you have a founding era in which we don't often know what these words meant. There's no glossary. There's a feature of the Constitution that should be there that is not. It's a glossary of terms. Because semantic precision is necessary for any science. We call it political science, but it's not. It's political philodoxy, like I said, loving of opinion. We have a dictionary, though, that was written by Noah Webster. And in fact, he wrote the first extensive American English dictionary all by himself. It's actually an incredible feat if you have the dictionary, because he looks at the etymology, the origin of the words. It's much more extensive than just a dictionary. In the preface to that dictionary, he writes that language is the expression of ideas. And if the people of one country cannot preserve an identity of ideas, they cannot retain an identity of language. Because often those seeking to dominate shift language to confuse the ideas. That is such a key point. You can see this in history. You have the context of Italy. Dante's The Divina Commedia, Divine Comedy, one of my favorites ever. What was his context? Well, he actually had the Florentine Guelph party. The Guelphs were split between the blacks and the whites. The blacks were Catholic, but also really supportive of the papacy. The whites, Catholic, but not supportive of the papacy. Then you had the Ghibellines. It's Guelph, so I should say. Well, this pro-papal party would actually use Latin in all the public meetings, but the people spoke Italian, so it was language was used as a way to control. So we have to appreciate history. We have to appreciate context. You can't just read the words. You can't. Often the decay of a language is also the decay of ability to acquire, I'm going to term it semantic precision. Now, what does that mean? What is some semantics? Meaning. You need to precisely mean something. If I got up right now and asked you all to define gravity, you would probably use different words. You'd probably use different sentences. But you would probably all capture the concept of gravity. But if I got up and said, define rights, probably have as many different definitions as there are people. That's because political science has no science in it at its foundation. You have Isaac Newton says Principia, and a sea of relatives finds a few basic truths. And based on that understanding, that clear statement of what was already true, but statements that we could refer to. 300 years, we go from walking as the principal mode of transportation, carriages, if you will, to cars for even the most poor in America. That's pretty amazing. 300 years. I assert that the author of Declaration did the equivalent in the social sciences. We just haven't been referring to it, haven't been understanding it. He took a sea of relatives in the social sciences with the basic truths that you could base a social system that would be fulfilling the needs of every individual. Okay. So you, it's interesting, in linguistics there's something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The idea is that language shapes your ideas. It's kind of interesting. I don't agree with it. This is kind of a linguistic determinism, that the language you use will determine the ideas you're able to get. I reject that, but I do think there's a point to be made on the relationship between the language we use today and the disconnect between the founders. You read the Constitution, it's in the common language of their day. We read it, who even understands it? Read the statute. Not only are the words confusing, we've lost the background, the context of interpreting it. In fact, I want to make a point of this. So, for instance, who knows this? Inclusio unius est exclusio aliis. It's a Latin maxim. It's behind the Constitution. That if you just read the words, you totally miss. What it means is the inclusion of one is the exclusion of another. When an item is included, you have a list. Any unspecified items are excluded. People in the founding era knew that. So they read the Constitution, they see a list again. We don't. So we have to recapture our emphasis in language. I pose the question, was the Tower of Babel and the chaos that ensued merely the outward and easily viewed manifestation of the intellectual battle already lost? We often see things in events, right? I'm saying, is this the cough when the cold is already acquired? So now let's try to take this and turn it toward the Constitution. I want to do one word. Just pick one word and just show how words have meaning, and those meanings are so important. And not just in the historical context, but using the historical context for understanding and then deriving principles from that apply anytime. To do that, let me write this on the board. So remind me, I want to cover this before I'm done. This is an Egyptian term. It takes about a paragraph to define in English. One word. I want to come back to this. I want to end with this because it's a good example of what I'm saying, is word concept distinction, and how even the ancients had concepts that we're dealing with today. Okay. I want to read for a good historian, F.E. Peters, Harvest of Hellenism. See if this has any application today. So here's a word that has meaning. What is a Congress? Notice Article 1 of the Constitution of the United States creates a Congress. If you look at Article 6 of the Utah Constitution, it creates a legislature. Now, they are both legislative bodies, but there is a distinction that goes at the very core of a term that I want to cover, spend the rest of the time on almost. Federal. What does this word mean? Okay, because there was a Congress in the ancient world. The ancient world the founders were so familiar with it, by the way. They were such good students of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Congress at Corinth. Now, what brought them together? You had a guy named Socrates, and some of the context here is that you essentially have these wars between the Persians and the Greeks. Now, the Greek city-states, there were so many of them, and they were all distinct political bodies. But you had someone named Socrates who gave what's called the panegyric oration. And he called for a program of political action that would unite the polis, plural for polis, city-state, not as an empire, but as a confederation. And that would have as its object the opening of new frontiers on old soil. Persia had taken what's today Turkey, but there's a lot of Greek city-states there. So he wanted to unite them in a federal system, with the object being to free those sister states. So there's a Congress of the polis, plural, not the legislature, Congress, in 337. And the delegates there chose as kind of the leader Philip II. This is the father of Alexander the Great, who eventually would fulfill what they had in mind and more. Now, let me read some of this. See, there's some tension here that I think is so pertinent. I just want to try to open your eyes to something bigger than just the American context, the entire historical context of Western civilization. Okay. After a few false starts, Philip and then Alexander attempted to govern them, city-states, at least the general lines of their policy through the instrument of the League of Corinth. Now, by the way, you voluntarily joined the League. Sparta did not join, ever. They always disliked the Macedonians. A loose federation of Malin polis organized on the principle of proportional representation. You have that thing in the early American system. The League of Corinth had no power to intervene in the affairs of its member polis. It governed and tempered the relations of the Greek states among themselves, anything that pertained to all the city-states. And would not interfere in internal affairs except in extraordinary circumstances. You find that in the Constitution as well, rebellion and insurrection. Now, what's so interesting is this. He goes over how a lot of these leagues turned into a way for some of the city-states to dominate others. This is a theme that runs clearly through American history, especially in the 1860s. In all these instances, the aim of the association, no matter what the grounds of its foundation, was to persuade the members, by one means or another, to take concerted action for what was presumably their common advantage, or you could put in that place, general welfare. Anyway, there's so much more to this, but it's like reading a page out of American history. And see, the founders were students of this, but you see the context of the distinction. What does federal mean? Well, of course, the Congress, the Stamp Act Congress, 1765, the colonies sent ambassadors. So congressmen were ambassadors to meet, to deal with issues that pertain to the whole I'm going to try and wrap this up. There, well, in fact, I should probably just skip this. Anyways, federal, you can see in Vattel's work, The Law of Nations, what it means. I mean, it's all over when you get it. And what's so interesting is when you look at the convention in 1787, James Madison was coming with essentially a coup d'etat, a national system. If you look at the Virginia plan and compare that to what ended up happening point by point by point, any point that was national was changed to be federal. And this debate was so intense too. I mean, it's one of the main reasons Dr. Kelly opposed it. He just said it's just federal enough. Just wait until the government there becomes dominant to the point where the states are subservient. In fact, Luther Martin in Maryland argued in the pamphlet that it was just federal enough to get through, but national enough to be a power center. So there were different cultures in the colonies. It really were. People think, oh, it's just the issue of slavery 30 years later. No, there is, read out by and see that there is such a distinct culture between more northern Pennsylvania and southern. They were afraid that this system would become Frankenstein. Federal, what's interesting, Foid is the root of the word here, and it's related to fides, which the Latin word, often translated faith, doesn't mean that in the Christian sense, or even in the sense that was spoke of earlier, but more of the idea of a treaty contract based on mutual respect between parties, plural parties. And you'll see why words matter. If you read the Declaration, it's of the free and independent states, but you read Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, it's one nation, born in liberty, one nation. You confuse the words, you confuse the ideas. And keep in mind, the Constitution, the only crime defined in the Constitution is treason. How is it defined? Levying war against them. Plural, states. Words have meanings. Okay, now in terms of interpretation of the Constitution, principles in general, there's often the kind of false alternative. It's called an A or B fallacy. Opposed just two things. Okay, I heard.
If you go a little over, no one's going to complain.
Okay, all right. I just don't want to be disrespectful to people's time. So
if you take an extra 5 minutes or so to finish something up,
oh,
no
I would love that extra 5 minutes.
No one's going to cry.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So often people get stuck in what I think is a false alternative. And because I don't have time, I'm not trying to oversimplify, but I kind of need to for time. You have an original intent crowd. And like I said, there are different kinds of original intent interpreters. And then you have what's called the living constitution crowd. That's been several brands. I think both of them miss the point. Because a lot of, I don't have time to get into the questions themselves, but there's some basic questions that need to be answered before we approach the words. What is a constitution? What even is one? And then within that, what is the Constitution of the United States or the Constitution of Utah? You know, you say, okay, here's the general category of dog, but what kind of dog is it? All right, you know, there's different kinds of constitutions, but what specifically is the kind of constitution? You have who may authoritatively interpret the Constitution, but there's a difference of opinion. Who's the authoritative interpreter? And that'll differ depending on the issue. You have how should it be interpreted? That's last. But see, you know how in math there's order of operations? And if you violate that order, you'll get the wrong answer. It's called syntax error. It's often in science too. You start with your conclusion and then cherry pick facts to justify it. People often have a political opinion and then approach the Constitution and interpret it in a way to justify that opinion, as opposed to interpreting to understand what it is, what specific kind it is, who's the authoritative interpreter, how it should be interpreted. You see, this transcends partisan, I don't even want to call it politics. Politics is defined by Noah Webster's The Science of Government. Politics now, who knows what it is? Yeah, seriously. Okay. So I'm going to leave that hanging, and I'm going to ask a question. What was the purpose of constitutional interpretation intended to merely be made up of historical research? Of seeking the political agenda of the present? Or was it meant to be an analysis of truths which were to be the basis of the moral commitments behind the Constitution? To seek the meaning, should we just do historical research? See, history brings context, and I want to show how important context is. But when you follow people, often you're right when you're right, and you're wrong when you're wrong. You see, the Constitution was the imperfect attempt at creating government according to the Declaration. It was a good attempt, but still imperfect. But if you're so tied to people as opposed to principle, you'll seal your fate to theirs, essentially. I'm reminded of Alice in Wonderland. What's it called? Right, yeah. What was that? Walrus and Carpenter. Remember, all the oysters just follow, and what happens as a result? It was just a nice little walk, right? Okay. We need to seek the principles, and I think that was their goal anyway. Was it an end? Are these things ends unto themselves, or are they means to the attainment of more freedom in modern society? So once again, history is for context. Philosophy is for concepts. Now, I propose an alternative to the original intent and the living Constitution crowd. I want to read a good analogy. This is so great. Okay. And, I should point out, history stays in time. Principles are above it. They fly whenever. Doesn't matter if you're 6,000 years ago, 5,000 years in the future. Suppose I tell my children simply that I expect them not to treat others unfairly. I no doubt have in mind examples of the conduct I mean to discourage, but I would not accept that my meaning was limited to these examples for two reasons. First, I would expect my children to apply my instructions to situations I had not and could not have thought about. Second, I stand ready to admit that some particular act I had thought was fair when I spoke was in fact unfair, or vice versa. If one of my children is able to convince me of that later, in that case, I should want to say that my instructions covered the case he cited, not that I had changed my instructions. I might say that I meant the family to be guided by my concept of fairness, not by any specific conception of fairness I might have had in mind. This points out that had the children's thinking for themselves not been consistent with their father's instructions, he would have meant something quite different from what he said. He would have meant not treat others fairly, but do as I say fairness demands. In the latter case, what's uppermost in the father's mind isn't fairness or his children's being fair or their reputation fairness. It's his authority over his children. And I might add, why even have an amendment provision if they intended us to be bound by their opinions? Let's take just a quick example. And so I am asserting that the Constitution of the United States, yes, it is a historical document, but more importantly, it's a document of commitment to principle. It's a charter of moral commitments. It's principle-based. Let's take free speech, found in the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. If we were to limit our interpretation of that term to merely what the founders had, or even could possibly have in mind at the time, setting aside even the issue of determining which founder, then the protection would obviously not apply to any of the modern modes of communication, due to their not even existing in 1791. Yet if we take the concept of free speech, and not merely the framers' ratifiers' respective conceptions of it, then the principle would apply just as much today as it did then. Taking the concept as opposed to the historical conception that would assume and approach the Constitution based on a moral commitment to things such as free speech. So it's principle-based, truth-based. It's philosophy, which comes out when you do study things like history. Now, what's so interesting about that too is, so this year's the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta, so I'm trying to fit that in too. The Magna Carta is a historical document. You know how quickly it became irrelevant? 9 weeks. 9 weeks. It was a failed peace treaty between barons and the king. But 800 years later, we're still talking about it. Is that because of the baron's conception or the concepts that were in there? I mean, some of which are very relevant, some of which are very relevant. Oh, 1 minute. Okay. I want to bring this all around. Yeah, there's so much more to this. I didn't even get the full. So this is also to get them the basis for appreciating the principles. I didn't even make it to the principles themselves, let alone the forms, the administrative forms.
You're just going to have to come back again.
I will anytime. Search for God in Ancient Egypt, Jan Osman, a Dutch scholar. This I found so profound, especially in the context of what we're talking about here. Seeking history for the context, using philosophy for the concepts. I think one of the biggest problems we have is we get, if we even get to that point, we get stuck in time. We recognize that principles, true, correct principles, true anytime. That's not to say there are relatives. Just that point. Mott. What makes this even more interesting, by the way, is that the more scholars study this, they're finding ancient Egypt as the fountain for Western philosophy, Western civilization. It's often seen as essentially a merging of Greek thought, sometimes Roman thought, with essentially the Bible, Christianity, Judaism, Christianity. But they're finding both of those are influenced by Egypt the more they study. There's a book called Stolen Legacy for those who are interested. Yeah, I'm going to try and get this because I think this just brings it all together. Mott designates the idea of a meaningful, all-pervasive order that embraces the world of humankind, objects, and nature. In short, the meaning of creation. The meaning, forms, platonic forms, the form in which it was intended by the Creator God. So he's going to take almost 3 pages trying to discuss this one term. But within it, there's a distinction for the administration, the goals of administration. based on justice, rights, fairness, stopping theft, stopping those things that necessarily infringe on the rights of others. And keep in mind, this is what Ra is putting the Pharaoh up to in relation to the people. The present condition of the world no longer corresponds to this meaning. The difference manifests itself in the phenomenon disfet. You know what this is? Lacking this. It just means lack. Sickness, death, scarcity, injustice. I'm trying to focus on the political things here, but this is deeper than that. Falsehood, theft, violence, war, enmity, envy. All these are manifestations of lack in a world that has fallen into disorder. Which I don't think there's a better word to describe our context than disorder. Through loss of its original plenitude of meaning. There's plenitude. The condition of being full or complete. It wanted things just. There are things that are for the individuals to figure out for themselves in other contexts. Spiritual salvation, you name it. But in this context, it's mere the protection of rights and the enforcement of duties for each individual. The meaning of creation lies in its plenitude, in its being complete, which yields order and justice naturally. It says it by byproduct, right? So again, the Constitution, not an end unto itself, it was a means. They're getting this distinction. Where all are cared for, no one is oppressed, no one commits deeds of violence against others, no one needs suffering. Suffering, scarcity, injustice, crime, rebellion, war, and so forth had no meaning for the Egyptians. They were symptoms of an emptying or estrangement of meaning from the world. These principles, which had distanced itself from its origin in the course of history. I like this a lot. The Egyptians tolerated history only with difficulty. To cite Messiah Eliad's formulation regarding archaic societies. They did not see reality in the contingency of ordinary or even extraordinary occurrences and events, but in Mut as the embodiment of an original plenitude of meaning that manifested itself as justice. Turning their historical perspective backward, they strove with all their might to keep the original plenitude of meaning in view and bring it into force through constant activity. And of course, to the Egyptian mind, there's either order or disorder. So, just as Aristotle said, and I don't agree with Aristotle often, the words, the battle of ideas often comes through the misinterpretation, shifting of meaning. We need to be sensitive to that. We need to be sensitive to that and really seek to understand and then build on that foundation our opinions. That's what a philosopher does. Philodoxer doesn't need to. So, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Skyler.
Thank you.
I want to say, I think that the part that, as I'm listening, well, I thought of two things I wanted to share that really spoke to me. One was the real focus on why we want to know about principles. And I love that idea about the concepts and the conceptions, that we want to understand the principles so that we don't have to ask the questions and argue and be confused over and over every time any new issue comes up. That concept I love. When I learned more in depth about principles, I realized that's the way to live in all aspects of our lives. That needs to apply to government. That needs to apply to everything we do. Matt and I try a lot in our parenting to make sure that we're principle-based, and then any situation that comes up, we can know what to do because of the principles behind the issue or the fight or what. I mean, when you talked about something could come up that the father didn't know or didn't foresee when he was teaching his child, I was like, oh yeah, that happens. You cannot predict what the kids are going to come up with to do, and so I love that that teaching. And if we can learn to find the principles and to figure out how they apply to us, we are going to be right on where we need to be.
And notice too that learning, understanding is necessarily an individual thing. No one can learn for someone else. You can help each other. No one can learn for someone else. Yeah. It's necessarily individual.
I love that. On that note, in fact, I was thinking, did anyone feel like you got something that inspired you out of listening to Skyler today? That's just about all of us here. I can definitely say that for me. That is definitely what we would hope for and intend out of Weekly Wise. Another thing that I got from what Skyler said was we homeschool our children, and just this last year, my now 6-year-old saw me. I was studying a book. It was Jesus the Christ I was studying, and I was making a vocabulary list. That's a good one for a vocabulary list. And she was like, "Mom, what are you doing?" And I said, "Anytime I find a word and I don't know what it means, I write it down and write the definition." And she'd never heard of the idea before, and she said, "I want a vocabulary list." And as I was listening, I thought, next time I want a vocabulary list, I'm just going to call Skyler. What words can I study this week, and what books can I look in to find out what they mean? Because he could keep me busy all year, I think. So I just really, really appreciated that. And we'll kind of change gears from here. We're going to still be focusing, hopefully, on the principles, but now there will be principles applied to a totally different concept, although when the thing about principles is they can apply across the board. So hopefully it won't be too big of a jump. I'm going to turn the time over to my husband, Matt Parks, and he's going to share with you about the business that we promote. And to me, the connection, the reason why I love what Matt's going to say and what Skyler is going to say is about learning, that we all have important things to do on the earth. And I believe that so strongly. And it is something that drives me in every little thing I do, that I'm thinking about what I need to do while I'm on the earth. And learning about principles and about government and history helps me to get that. That's why I want to learn these principles and why I care so much about liberty, so that I can live the mission I have and so other people can too. The business that we promote and share about, to me, that's what it offers too. It's another vehicle for living life's missions and for continuing on learning. And so that's why we're excited to share. I'll just introduce real quick my husband, Matt. I think he's really fantastic and cool. I am a bit biased. I know him better than most. Matt's a lot of fun, and one of the things I love about him is that when he shares, you can feel his passion and excitement for the things that he shares. I love to listen to him speak, and so I hope that you do too. And with that, I'll welcome him up.
Thanks. I'll just move this a little bit if you don't mind, Skyler. Just stand still. Whatever. I will be brief. As I listen to Skyler, as I've heard him before, one thing that I feel inside me, that I feel inspired from hearing him speak and hearing many speak about things that I care about, is to change, to do something in my life to make a change. And I don't know what your experience has been, but mine is that anytime we try to create change, whether it's in our own lives or in government or in our place of work or anywhere we're at in our families, we tend to meet resistance. Is that your experience?
Otherwise, we
yeah, otherwise we change. We tend to meet resistance. And meeting that resistance, sometimes, depending on our level of commitment to that change, can shut us down, or it can fire us up, right? And so there are some things that personally I believe in that I would like to see changed. And so I want to share with you my why, if you will. We call this Weekly Whys, W-H-Y-S. The reason is we want to talk about the whys, what we care about, what inspires us. We can have a lot of whats, things we do that match that, and I'll be sharing some of those today, but I want you to understand my whys. One of them is I believe that in our world today, in our society, we have an epidemic of a social epidemic of accumulation mindset. That's what I call it. We have this belief that in order to live our lives to the fullest, we need to try to hoard everything we can so that the day comes eventually that we'll be able to retire, which actually, I understand the original word, and you can correct me, but my understanding is the original word meant to put cows out to pasture to die. So we can retire and hope that we die before our money runs out. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds depressing to me. I believe that resources on this earth are meant to be used and that we are stewards of them. Now, what does a steward do? A steward is someone who uses the resources given by a master and creates an increase to supply him and his family and a return to the master. Right? That's what a stewardship is all about. I believe we're stewards. I don't believe in hoarding, and I don't believe in, just frivolous spending, so to speak, or squandering the resources we've been given. I'm not just talking about money, though I am talking about that, but it's a principle. It applies broadly. So with that being my core, my underneath, I want to share with you a what. The company we represent, we are representatives for a company called Strongbrook. You may have heard of it. It used to be called REIC. And one of the services they offer, we'll talk about 3 different core pillars or services that we offer. One of them is facilitated or done-for-you real estate investing. Now, I don't know what goes through some of your mind when you hear that, but I know what went through my mind when I first heard that, and the word was scam. All right, so if you think that, it's okay. That's what I thought too. Because I had gone to a lot of real estate education stuff. I don't know if you've been familiar with that industry, and I'm not trying to knock them. They strive to provide a good service in teaching people about how to go and invest in real estate. The problem is that most people's competence is not real estate, and they don't want it to be. That was the situation I found myself in. I went to a seminar. They put a lot of pressure on me to try to pay for, multi-$1,000 classes, and at the end of the day, it was, here's a book, here's some information, go for it, good luck. And I'm thinking, I barely know how to use a drill. Like, I don't want to be fixing toilets, right? But I am interested in that concept of using my resources to bless another's life, provide homes, provide housing, and create a return. And so I was looking, and I'd pretty much given up in finding anything that would work for me because I couldn't, it wasn't my competence. I didn't trust myself. You can, if you've heard stories of people who have lost their shorts in real estate, you know someone that has. Yeah. Who hasn't heard of the horror stories? I had. And so I didn't trust myself to do that. Well, Bonnie's father, he encouraged me to go to one more evening seminar, and I said no. I'm like, I'm done. I've looked at it. They're all the same. No thanks. He kept bugging her. He kept bugging us. And finally, my wife said, just humor him. Go. You don't have to do anything. So I went, and I was sitting in the back corner, very humph, right? Very condescending. And I was surprised. I had an interesting experience because I found a company that told me right off the bat, you know what, we don't trust you to do real estate yourself because you'll screw it up. And I said, thank you. Yes, you're right, I will, because it's not my competency. And they said, yeah, exactly. It was the first time someone that was talking about it resonated with me. Well, so the short of the matter is they do done-for-you real estate. They find the home, fix it, get tenants, take care of the property management, help you know when to refinance or sell. It's a short-term buy and hold strategy, so you own a home for anywhere from 2 to 5 years. We'll turn it over and do it again. And they sat down with me and created a 10-year game plan. Here's what we can try to create for you in 10 years. Sufficient to replace your income with passive residual income so that then you can use that. And you want to talk about retirement? No, I'm not going to retire. I'm going to then go, it'll expand my ability to live what Bonnie was talking about, my life mission. That's what I'm interested in. That's what I want to be. That's what I want to do. So that's one of the services that is offered. There is a fee to participate, to hire this team of over 200 experts that are doing it all for you. And it ranges anywhere from $99 a month to get started, or the maximum package is $16,000. And there's different ranges. It depends on what you need, what you want. But the idea is we'll create a plan for you to have residual income through real estate without you having to do the work or the know-how. And your name's on title. You own it. I own 3 homes thanks to them, plus this one. They're investments. They're doing well. They're cash flowing. They're growing in equity. It's a wonderful experience for us. We love it. So that's one. Another reason I love that is because I believe in the concept of property and land ownership. I believe that has a tie into, frankly, our liberty and our individual freedoms. Second, I believe also that one of the principles that this country was founded on, though perhaps not enshrined in law, was entrepreneurship. I believe in the concept of entrepreneurship. In 1900, we had 90% of our population as entrepreneurs, largely farmers, landowners. Today, it's 90% of people who are in the workforce. We got about 10% or less that are entrepreneurs. It's completely flopped. Imagine if today 90% of people owned their own business and had to deal with all the regulations that government provides. Do you think opinions might be a little different? Imagine if we as the people were providing the services that we need as a community, that we all knew how to provide for each other in different arenas. Would we be as dependent feeling as we are? Or would we have a larger feeling of, well, I can take care of myself. I can be self-reliant. I believe in entrepreneurship. Now, if you're like me and have had no experience because of the way you were brought up and educated, and love my parents, love how they educated me, appreciate it, but I did not grow up, I grew up with some influence of the idea of entrepreneurship, but not a lot. And I have no idea, I started out with no idea how to run a business. The business that we run, it's basically a marketing business, right? We're marketing the services of Strongbrook. You can do that for free. There's no sign-up fee. There's no monthly, you can start this business for free, literally. You can refer people to Strongbrook, and if it resonates with you, that you want to buy real estate, when you pay that fee to come in, there is a thank you check for referring people. That's our business. That's what we do. We refer people, we get thank you checks. You can do that too if that interests you. It's completely free to participate. Lastly, and this is one that touches a lot on what we've done here and means a lot to me, I would ask a question. Have you guys heard the phrase, the quality of your life is the quality of your questions? The quality of the questions you ask determine the quality of your life. I believe that. So let me ask you this question. For you personally, what is the purpose of education? I'm not talking about for your kids. I'm not talking about for society. I'm talking about you. What is the purpose of your education? I believe that answer will be different for all of us. I believe it's different for each of my children. I will share with you what it is for me. I believe that the purpose of my education, I, Matthew Parks, seek education to develop my character and my experiential competence such that I can live the mission of my life that God desires. I believe in God. And I believe that He has a will for me, that I have a choice, but that He guides me. That is the purpose for me of my education. To have the character, to develop the character and the competence, the experiential competence to live and fulfill that mission. Now, it wasn't until I was about 30 years old that I found out that I had my eyes open and realized how uneducated I was and am, frankly. Don't get me wrong, I have had excellent training, right? I went through school, I got excellent training, I have what in our society would be considered an excellent job. High paying, I program. It's great, according to everything society measures. And you know, if it was my life mission, it would be great. But it's not. It's training that got me there, not an education. See the difference? So the third pillar in what we put together and offer at Strongbrook is what we call a mentoring network. For me, I believe that one of the key ways to obtain that education is through classics and mentors. I love to read. I do not read like Skyler reads. My education is not there to what Skyler has learned, quite frankly. And I don't know if it will, because that's not my life mission, that's his. But I'm getting off. I'll come back. This network of mentors is been set in place. We've gone out and reached out to world-class mentors on numerous topics. It could be health and exercise and nutrition. It could be mindset. It could be wealth creation or financial management. It could be sales and business. You name it. You find a topic or an area you'd like to educate yourself and improve. And, you know, they say there's an app for that. Well, we've got a mentor for that. All right? Someone who has donated content into one repository, one vault, that you can go online and look at any time of day or night and consume that content. Bonnie just the other day had our baby woke up and then she couldn't go back to sleep, so she spent 4 hours watching a mentor on parenting that we really love. Her name's Nicolene Peck. She's phenomenal. And after that, the next day, we had an excellent discussion about, okay, we need to tighten up ship here, here, and here, and we just went to work because of what she learned from a mentor. Education for my wife, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I know that it's related to her mission of family. I know it. So whatever your area of life that you desire to educate yourself in, you can serve. Now we built this on a freemium model, which is you can participate, you can gain content completely free. We have an app. It's being released, supposed to be released this month. I know software development. It'll be next month, but it's coming out soon. They've been submitted to the iPhone and Android stores, so we're waiting to hear back. Completely free app. You'll get content daily pushed to you that you can just hear from a different mentor every single day, a little quick message. But it's all about what's your education. What is the purpose of your education? And could this mentor network be a tool that helps that? If not, don't worry about it. Don't just eat ice cream and don't worry about it. But if it does, talk to us. Let's look into it. See if it's something that piques your interest. Right? So with that, I want to conclude. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Thank you, Skyler, so much. Very much appreciated you. And we're going to invite you back up. You come back up because Bonnie has something for you. Come on up. And before she... Sure, I can. All right, I'll do it. Next week with Weekly Wise, our guest speaker is Marianne DeNovelis, as long as she doesn't have a baby. She's close. But and she will be talking specifically geared more to women. Her Oh, now that I'm up here, I spaced what our topic was. Queen of the Kingdom. Thank you. Our topic is Queen of the Kingdom. Fulfilling your role as a woman, kind of thing is my understanding of it. I'm not a woman. So, anyway, with that, I was talking with Skyler. He hadn't had Ben & Jerry's before. I love Ben & Jerry's. So, I told him about a number of flavors. He picked this one. It's peanut butter fudge core. It's chocolate and peanut butter ice creams with many peanut butter cups and a peanut butter fudge core. It's delicious. We have a bunch of other flavors up there. So, you guys ever watch tech shows where they do unboxings? Oh, but that's good. For those of you online, I offer you some, but I haven't figured out that technology yet. So, a little more programming, I guess. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all.